Buongiorno and Pacific greetings to you all. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Jennifer and Kolinio Samuta with us, and we will be talking about migration issues. So I'm going to just ask them to please introduce themselves. Buongiorno to you both, Jennifer and Kolinio.
Buongiorno, Sevu.
Arnara Sevu.
And Mata.
I'll start. I'm Jennifer Samuta. My father comes from Gumea in Thakundrove, and my mother was heralds from Unuther Island in Thakundrove, Fiji. I am the director and principal solicitor of Samuta McComber Lawyers. We're a micro firm based in Brisbane. Our head office is in Brisbane, Australia, and we have an office in Sydney, New South Wales. We specialise in Australian immigration, visa applications, complex immigration and citizenship matters.
And Sevu, my name is Kolinio Samuta. I'm from Rakiraki, Ra, the province of Ra. Basically, I am the support backbone of SML and support of my wife in her field. Just basically helping out our Fijian community here in Brisbane and around Australia, just giving some genuine direction towards getting proper legal representation and information about migration. Working alongside my wife.
Well, we started the firm 5 years ago in 2017, and I'd been practicing as a solicitor maybe for 4 years by that stage, and I initially worked at Refugee and Immigration Legal Service at West End. That's what got me into the area of immigration, and then I worked for a private practice for 2 years, and after some time I noticed that obviously in the field of migration law, you're dealing with migrants, and then you're obviously dealing with a lot of clients from multicultural backgrounds. And I noticed after some time that people were coming to see me because I was Fijian and was the same colour as them and understood family structures and dynamics that a lot of Australian or Western solicitors didn't. And while I grew up in Australia, I am Fijian at the core, and so going back to the islands and visiting, my mum's village and being aware of the culture. While I didn't grow up in it, I was aware of some issues. And then obviously marrying Collie, who is full Italk and migrated from Fiji, gave me that understanding. And it led to Collie and I kind of discussing community issues and me realising there was a big gap in the market, so to speak, but more importantly, a gap in the support and legal access that was available to our people and other migrants. So I migrated when I was 5, and my parents worked on the banana farms in North Queensland, and I just so happened to want to be a lawyer so I could help people. I never realised one day it would be my people. But when I was working in private practice, I thought, what would my parents have done if they got into legal trouble? Where would they have gone? How scary it would have been for them to have to walk into a big building, a flashy law firm, to a person in a suit that looked nothing like them or didn't understand their background, or, that you could have a sister that was actually your cousin or an uncle that wasn't really your, immediate family member. So a lot of those smaller understandings. And so to bring that all around, Collie works for the firm while I'm a solicitor. Having community contacts has been really important for the foundation of the firm, but also people within the firm that understood our clients and that clients could communicate at a level that they probably wouldn't communicate to a lawyer or to me in their language and culturally. So I think that's been a big part of our success and our ability to reach to communities and Makes me a better lawyer when I have community understanding and a language and cultural understanding. And we've grown to a firm of 3 solicitors, 2 paralegals, and then support staff. So I feel like when we have a client, we understand all of their life, not just their legal issues, which is something I'm proud of. And so now we're basically doing community outreach because we're realizing that there's huge issues and a huge need for full legal advice and support. And there's a lot of misinformation in the community, to be honest, from our own community. Sadly, maybe their intentions are good, and maybe it's some of the migration pathways are a shortcut, maybe quick band-aid or short-term solution. But I'm finding that a lot of clients and inquiries that are coming our way are they're kind of at the end and almost have no choice but to go home, and that dream of living the Australian dream's short-lived because they haven't received wholesome, full legal advice. So that's a long introduction, but basically that's why we're here, and that's what we do. And we're at a stage now where we're ready to full force I will talk to whoever wants me to talk, and I will share my opinion on what needs to be done, because I think the Pacific Islanders are a huge untapped resource and we're such an asset to this world, and we shouldn't be shortchanging ourselves on opportunities and taking shortcuts, basically. So I'm all about empowering and being educated, because there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot of potential that hasn't been fully reached, I think, by our people in the Australian community. Thanks, Sevu. That's a long introduction.
Thank you very much for the introduction. No, that was great. That was great. Just bear with me one sec. I've just got a screaming dog over here that's been caught up.
Oh, what a no. Yes, Fiji, please.
That's why I muted
There's a
myself.
rooster.
I muted myself. One sec. So thank you so much for that introduction. And there definitely is, it's so good to hear about the work that you're doing, and encouraged by the efforts that you've made so far, and what a great asset and need that it is in the community. So there is definitely a lot of opportunities that are out there. So many have, like you have mentioned as well, that have been somewhat misled or being given different information. So it's really great to be able to have a chat with you both and to demystify and perhaps address some of the issues that some of our people have been facing. We wanted to cover some of the key questions that would often be asked. And this will be a good chance for us to just maybe cover some of those questions with you. And of course, the one of the ones that comes up a lot, which is about the protection visa. What is a protection visa? And also we'll lead from that into the bridging visa after the lodgement of an application for a protection visa. And what does all that mean? If you could take us through that, that would be great. Vinaka.
Yeah, of course. So we are seeing a lot of protection visa applications coming out of the Pacific Islands. And I am finding that the reason why a lot of people are applying for protection visas is because they're told or they hear that it's a cheap visa that will allow them to work in Australia and get Medicare. And so I understand the appeal of that, but the protection visa is actually for people, the purpose of it is for people who are seeking asylum in Australia. So basically they want Australia to recognise that they're a refugee. And so in order to be recognised as a refugee, the government needs to be satisfied that this person who's applying for a protection visa is fearful of returning home to their home country. And they're fearful because if they return home, there's a real chance that they'll be persecuted, so tortured, assaulted, that they fear for their life, really. That's the crux of the protection visa. So unless you can convince the government or that you have a real fear of returning to your home country, basically, if you can't prove that, or if the government's not satisfied of that, then you'll be refused your protection visa. So for most Pacific Islanders, in today's current climate, political climate, let's just put a name to it. So say Fiji. Fiji is a democracy, regardless of people's opinions. I know that there's lots of Fijians that perhaps don't believe that it's a true democracy, but on a global stand, it is a democracy. There's been an election, there's a prime minister. A lot of the claims that we're seeing coming out of the islands, for example, Fiji, are that people are fearful of returning to Fiji, or that, it's a hard life in Fiji, the economy is not good, and so that's why they're applying for a protection visa. But as I discussed before, the threshold is much higher than that. To be granted a protection visa, the government needs to recognise that you're a refugee, and to be recognised as a refugee, the government needs to be satisfied that if you went back home, that you'd be persecuted. So that's what the protection visa is. I think there's a lot of misinformation because of the ease of applying for a protection visa. It's cheap, it's quick, you put in a form, it's $40, and then you live here for several years and you can work. And I mean, I understand while you're here, it must seem like, you're living the dream, but unfortunately, that's only because the process is taking so long. It can take 6 months to 4 years potentially to have a decision on your protection visa application. But for most, it'll ultimately be refused. And then what I'm seeing is there is an appeal pathway to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, also called the Tribunal, also called the AAT. And if you put that application in, that basically takes maybe 3 to 4 years to appeal. And so for some people, that's 8 years of living in Australia. But ultimately, what I'm seeing, most protection visas at that stage then get refused. If they appeal it again, it could then be 10, 12 years to the federal court or to the highest court. And so because people are working and have Medicare access in that time, they feel as though, I don't know if it's self-denial or hope or false hope. I don't want to be cruel, but ultimately what will happen is a person's required to go home at the end of that, unless they're recognised as a refugee. There's a very, 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 very small percentage of Fijians being granted protection visas, and I cannot stress that enough. If it's very, very small. There's a lot of discussion around, or community chatter about, the tribunal overturning decisions, but I'll tell you, based on statistics, 3% of applications were successful at the tribunal for Fijian citizens last year. That's 1 out of 27 decisions. It's very minimal. And when I do look at the reports that are coming out of the tribunal, there's a very high number of applications by Fijians, and compared to other nations, and, very, 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 very minimal being approved. Like I said, 1 out of 27 last year. And that's just at the appeal stage. There's a lot more refusals at the first stage. But and then I think you mentioned the bridging visa, Sevu. I think from my putting stories together, I think people are misunderstanding, because when you arrive in Australia, you might arrive on a visitor visa or a student visa is what I'm seeing. And then someone wants to stay and then they get this advice about this protection visa. And so they lodge this protection visa. And what happens is when you lodge the protection visa, you're granted this bridging visa, and it's an actual automatic process. I am finding in the community there are some people charging to assist, whether or not they're migration agents or lawyers, a totally different matter. But I am seeing that applicants are told, put in this protection visa, I'll get you work rights, I'll get you Medicare rights. But in fact, that's not that person getting it. It's just automatic, because remember what we're dealing with is this humanitarian scheme. So Australia government has signed up. They will honour, I guess, their humanitarian obligations. And so that's what this protection visa scheme is for. And so it's there for real asylum seekers and real refugees. And so there's then this complementary process where a bridging visa is granted, and in that time while you're seeking asylum or having this protection visa processed, you're granted work rights and Medicare rights. So I guess the main point is, by putting in a protection visa application, you're also, whether you realise or not, you're putting in an application for a bridging visa. It's automatic. And so when your visa expires, so that student visa or tourist visa, whatever you came on, when that expires, if you've put in your protection visa application, this bridging visa kicks in. And then you sit on that bridging visa, or you hold that bridging visa for all that time until the decision on the protection visa application's made. And when I speak to Fijians who call me, or anyone that calls me, but very commonly in my firm, we get a lot of inquiries from the Fijian community, and I say, what visa do you hold? And they say, protection visa. And I say, no, send me your passport so I can check, because I think you have a bridging visa, because I know that not many Fijians get granted protection visas, and upon checking their passport and what visa they hold a bridging visa. So I think that's the first key thing I want to demystify and, smash out of the park, for everyone to be using the right words and have the right dialogue. Is when you lodge a protection visa, what's being granted isn't a protection visa, it's this bridging visa, which is a bridging visa. It's to bridge your stay, it's to make you lawful while this protection visa application's being processed. And making that clear is really important to me, because there's individuals I've seen that live here for years. And the saddest cases are the ones that have children. And if you have young children that then live here for 4, 8, 10 years, depending on how far you want to appeal things, those kids are pretty much Australian, but they're living here on this real temporary fragile visa, which ultimately will be refused. And I don't think any parent would consciously make those applications knowing how fragile that immigration status is. So yeah, just it's key to it's real key. A key issue is the misunderstanding around what happens when what this protection visa is to begin with. It's not a work visa, it's a refugee visa. And then the key issue around the understanding of what a bridging visa is and how that's temporary. And then finally, the key issue that overlays everything is it's unlikely that's going to be granted. And so its stay in Australia is temporary. And I'll just finish that off by saying, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but the whole point of raising that awareness is look at your other options. Don't do the cheap and nasty, because there's generally not a very happy ending, and people don't want to live in limbo. But there's other pathways, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Sevu, but there are other pathways that you can consider and you should consider, and you should weigh up the options. And if there's a real prospect there for an alternative visa, then that should be investigated rather than putting in a flimsy application, which if you are refused a protection visa and you have to go home, it's really hard to come back from that. It's really hard to come back and visit because, for minimal to no chance to come back, because the government has seen your immigration record and can see, that there's possibly another chance of, if they give you a visitor visa, that you'll do that again. So it is, that's the protection in visa, and that's the issues I'm finding with it.
Thank you so much for covering that very broadly. And this is such a, this particular area with the bridging visa and the protection visa is really a huge problem, I would call it, amongst visa applications within our community. Also from my experience, because every person that I tend to, probably I would say 90% of the time, are those who, when I ask them what visa application have you, what have you applied on, and they always come back to protection visa. And there's still a lot of misinformation on the protection visa. So I'm so glad that you opened that up and given us a good understanding as to the protection visa and that it is automatic, because there are these, people who are still going around in the charging people money and saying, I'm going to get you, the opportunity to be able to work, your opportunity to get your Medicare card and and so forth. And so people automatically assume that this person has got the, when it's just an automatic part of the process is the bridging visa. And then they go through this, and as you've mentioned, going through it, some of them exactly. So you get to meet people and they're 10 years in, and now they're facing the tribunal. Because I do translation, I've actually been in the tribunal and the High Court translating. And then they seem to live in this false hope because somebody's planted it in their head that somehow, and as you've mentioned, the percentage is very low, and that Fiji really doesn't qualify under this refugee type of status, right? Maybe you can go into that a little bit more, because I think this is the biggest barrier that we have is this refugee, this protection visa. And then I think that even if we just focused a lot on this, because there's so much there to unpack still, especially around the fact as well is, people getting into their heads somehow that that somehow they would be able to they don't understand that the protection visa, the criteria for it, and the type of evidence that you need to be able to stand in those, the process and to be granted an actual visa to become a resident or citizen of the country is humongous. And then you've got people who have just been so misled. They come with lots of reference letters. They've been told, just get reference letters from everywhere. I had somebody turn up with a huge pile of reference letters from all different communities and churches. And I just felt so sad for them, because the judge practically turned around and said, you've got 30 days to live. And it didn't sink in. They couldn't understand how that could have happened when they've been told, and it's been going on for years and years, and they've been able to work and do all these things. And all of a sudden, the road, the gate to walk through
smashed.
It is sad. It is sad.
I'll be completely honest and open. I didn't want to touch protection visas. when I knew if someone came to me from Fiji and they'd applied for a protection visa, I was pretty unforgiving at the very start of practice from my perspective of, you know, the criteria and what was involved and the claims that were being made. But 10 years later, I'm much, much wiser, realizing that there has been a mixture of misinformation, exploitation, if I can say that, because
It is exploitation.
people are desperate for opportunity and are hopeful. And, you know, as islanders, we have faith in the impossible. But that's been preyed on, in my opinion. And I'm more forgiving
faith in
now.
our people, right? Faith in our own people, that they would take care of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm much more forgiving now because I'm realizing the more I talk to people, and again, these are conversations that Collie's had to have with me because he has that interaction with the community in the language and is a bit more understanding. But now that I appreciate that, it's a combination of those factors. I think the other thing too is with social media, and I've been in Fiji in the village and I've heard someone saying, man, you know, Isimeli, he's in Sydney and he's living there now. And I'm like, how is he living there? Like straight away the cogs are turning and I'll never say anything. And then after a few years, I know he's not living there. He doesn't have a visa. He's probably put in a protection visa application. I just sit back and I've kept those thoughts to myself. And then ultimately Simeli comes back to the village because he's, 4 years have passed. And it's sad because they've gone to Australia. By the way, Ismaili is a fake name. I make that up. But they've gone to Australia, maybe on like a work visa, and they had an incredible opportunity. And then some cowboy in Sydney has told them, hey, you want to live here forever, put in a protection visa, and there's no prospects for it. And poor Ismaili, to use that as an example, just totally that dream of getting a work visa here long term has gone down like a lead balloon because of this incorrect advice and information. And I think, that conversation, there's a lot of the aim for us talking more about this is because there's a lot of wrong noise. There's a lot of noise around this protection visa, and there's actually no counter advice or anyone saying don't apply for it, because it does. It looks like this golden ticket to Australia. Like, I can live here and I'm working here, and then everyone's seeing posts on social media, but no one has the long-term or bigger picture in mind or in view, is that they will go back. And I find our people, even when that happens, like when the sad ending happens, we still, they might go back, but we go on, we live on. No one really kind of like dwells on a negative outcome. So again, the conversation doesn't happen at the end. So the conversation about not applying for the protection visa never happens, or the conversation about what is this protection visa hasn't happened because West Fijians and Islanders generally are so positive and make the most of the opportunity. But I have for a long time been that person that enters a room and brings bad news or like an objective view. But I think, there needs to be more education around what the protection visa is. I think too, Sevu, one of the issues is because the process takes so long, it really does look like people are living the dream. So, someone leaves Nandi or the village or Suva and everyone's like, oh man, they're in Australia now working. And so because the process takes 4 years, or longer, it really does look like that golden ticket. I think the other thing too is historically or politically, with Fiji's political history, people were being granted protection visas, but closer to coup time, or all those coups.
The genuine one, like the one that we see that gets
Yes, but still, that's a very small statistic.
1 out of 27.
That's a very small statistic, and Fiji is a very different place when it's not in a coup. So, and that's where Fiji is at the moment. So it does also depend on who you are, and even those people that have been granted protection visas around the coup time or as a result of politics and whatnot, they were ministers, they were personal contacts to Bainimarama or politicians,
Any coup government.
or any
Government.
coup leader. And because they are bigger figures or probably more vocal in communities, I think it seems to be more, it's interpreted as a real possibility, but the bulk of applications that are coming in for Fijians are everyday citizens.
With no solid
Big
case.
issue.
Yeah.
No solid case. And a lot are being told what to say. So Australian government's not stupid. It's a legitimate refugee visa and it's a legitimate process. So unless, I'm not discouraging anyone that has some real fears, but unless you're fearful, then don't apply for the protection visa.
Yes.
Yes. On that point of protection visa, I've been talking to Jennifer for a few years now, actually, 2 or 3 years before COVID, been discussing with her the ideas of coming and giving information about protection visa, because in the last 3 years, I have friends and families and people that know me personally, people that know us, has been messaging about protection visa, and the advice we've been telling them, please do not apply for that visa. Look for other options that we have before you apply for protection visa. Because of the desperate to live in Australia, or I'll just apply for it. I've get to work, I've got Medicare. It's an easy way out, and you're waiting for maybe 10 years or over. But yeah, at the moment, I'm coming to Sydney in the next few weeks, just giving that information. Please look for your other options before you apply for protection visa, because the statistic that our firm find online is cruel. There's heaps of us Fijians applying for it. There's less chance we're going to get approved.
Just a dead end.
Just a dead end, yeah.
Mm.
Unless you have a solid case and there's legitimate in your case. Legitimacy there.
Yes. So unless if you really do need protection, and you have full evidence that you need protection from whoever, your adversary or the government, or and there's actual factual evidence that you can provide.
Yeah, videos, people that are coming in to get
exactly,
coming in and trying to kill your family,
things, right?
Are threats.
Yeah.
So think about the world, and think about those countries where people actually are being persecuted based on political opinion, gender, race, ethnicity, membership to a social group. That's kind of what you're claiming. If you're fearful about going back to your home country because you're going to be persecuted for those things, then great, put in your protection visa. I mean, we are currently handling one protection visa for a Fijian citizen, but that's only because I think they have a legitimate claim. But otherwise, I will be very straightforward. I'll say you are a Fijian citizen. Without looking at your claims, you're very unlikely to succeed unless you can prove to the government and you have real and objective evidence of threats of torture or persecution, then you're not going to get the protection visa. I think the other important thing too is, Sevu, which people don't understand, in Australia, the way the Migration Act works is you can't just keep putting in visas applications. Once you're refused a visa application in Australia, and when you're refused, and if you don't hold a real visa, so for example, on a bridging visa, there's something called a Section 48 bar, and you can Google it, Section 48 of the Migration Act, and essentially it bars you from making a further application, with a few exceptions, but even those exceptions are difficult to meet. And so the point of that is, if you are in Australia, you lodge a protection visa, you then go on a bridging visa, you then get a work visa opportunity or even a partner visa. If you are refused the protection visa, you then have this Section 48 bar that makes things very difficult, which there's some exceptions to it, but I won't go into it. But generally speaking, if you're Section 48 barred, it means that you might have to go home, apply for a visa from there, and then come back. But ultimately, some people think, I can just be here and then apply for a work visa, but it's not that easy. Again, to use an example, it's sad for those people who have been here for years. And then again, it's another dead end that they reach. So again, it's really important. I think the key message is get the initial advice before you put in an application, get an assessment of what your visa options are. Maybe you do have some other visa options, and then really think about it. Like, if you have no other choice and you still want to do the protection visa, then just have it clear in your mind that you're only going to be here short term. And while you're here, sure, work hard, save hard. So when you go home, you build a house in the village or do something, rather than living a high life in Australia temporarily and then sadly going back to not much. I'm not saying that's what happens, but I just think we need to be smart about the decisions that we're making. Be smart and have faith, basically.
Well, yeah, and getting the right information from the initial get-go.
Yeah.
Not following the mess of people that are applying for protection visa, because that's the sad part about being Fijian. Oh, I'm following him, he's doing this, let's all do it.
Like, people aren't fully honest about just what visa they hold, like, or if they're citizens or not. Like, there's a lot of show in the community as well. I'm sticking my head out there, but I will say it. You cannot believe what someone else is saying, because I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of people with no visas and no citizenship and visa issues, and I'm not making light of that at all, but there's a lot of misplaced trust in the wrong people, and I can't stress it enough. Get proper legal advice from someone who actually cares and knows the law, a registered migration agent, and you can check those people. Definitely do not take advice from any Tom, Dick and Harry, or even on the referral of someone. Google them. I don't give business cards out, because I think if you know my name, you should research me. I'm not a salesperson. Go on the internet, and if you can't find the name, you definitely shouldn't be letting them lodge your visa or give you any advice that's going to set your life up or stall your life or bring your life to a dead end. So, yeah.
Just basically we're getting the information from the get-go, Sevu. And that's what we're finding now. Well, 3 years down after COVID, people are coming with us, but it's too late. We're on the end tail. The information, I'm great you came in with this idea of interview and just letting our people know. Please get the correct information from the get-go and stop listening to other people that are pushing you to get protection visa, because the statistics says you're not going to get it for after 10 years. Limited numbers of visas are approved for that protection visa. And we have more people applying for that visa when they have other options. Get the advice, apply for other options before you get into protection visa. Protection visa is your last resort. go for other sort of visa.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Now, moving on to the other options that you both mentioned, maybe we can talk about that a bit as far as what other options are there that people can explore and look at as far as, you know, being able to actually come in and to work, be able to earn a living. What would be the other options that they could consider outside of the one that we've just talked about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm finding that Fijians are highly skilled with education, work experience. And so, you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about the protection visa, which falls under the humanitarian scheme. And so in Australia, there's also skilled work visa scheme and then family scheme. And so let's push humanitarian scheme aside and then look at family stream and skilled work visa stream. And so with skilled work visas, basically the government bases the visa program on its economic needs. So they look at skill shortages in Australia and they have a list. There's literally a list of occupations. It's a skilled occupation list. And that's a list, basically a list of occupations in Australia where there's a skill shortage. And I don't know how we can share this information, but you literally, I can send you the link, Sevu, and maybe we can distribute that somehow. But it's a list of all the occupations that are eligible for skilled work visas. And so there are other requirements that need to be met, such as English, skilled assessments, depending on which occupation, which is its whole another assessment process. And then you either can be sponsored by an employer who has a job for you back in that occupation, or you can do something through a process called Skill Select, where you provide an expression of interest and you need to meet something called a points test, and that looks, you're awarded points based on age, English proficiency, work experience, a number of years working in that occupation overseas or in Australia, and a few various other factors. But essentially the skilled work visa scheme is available to those people who have skills that are required in Australia. And so what I've seen for Fiji is, you know, we have this country that has highly educated, highly skilled people, but unfortunately not enough jobs. And so our people are migrating or working elsewhere temporarily. So obviously Australia is an option for that. There's a lot of need for trades, and there's a lot of trade qualified people in Fiji. I'm also finding financial advisors or auditors. There's a higher number, or at least people that have come my way, that are skilled in that area. Engineers, doctors. There are professions where if you were coming from Fiji, you might have to do bridging qualifications and whatnot, but trade occupations seem to be pretty straightforward, and like financial auditors and accountants similarly recognised. And then obviously you've got the PALM scheme, which I won't really go into because that's something that's kind of managed within in-country in Fiji and others. But certainly independently, work visas is a real option for Fijians, I think, and they can do that independently or by sponsorship. And then you've got, and that's a scheme, that's a pathway to permanent residency and then citizenship. So that's a good option. And then there's temporary visas available, similar process, but they're more short-term, highly skilled visa options. But this is what I mean. So if, say, a Fijian called me, well, they do call, or they provide they make an inquiry about visa options, that's the first thing that I do. I say, send me your resume that's up to date with your skills and qualifications. And the first step always is to match it up with, okay, this person has clear skills in this field. Let's see if that fits within an occupation on the list. That's the very first step. And then, we have a chat around skills assessments and what that process involves. English proficiency, we look at we assess possible independent options, so independent skilled migration options, which relies on the points test that I mentioned earlier, because obviously if you're living in Fiji, you may not have an employer available in Australia that's willing to sponsor you. Likewise, if you're in Australia and you're working in a job, so if you're here, if you're in Australia on a visitor visa and, you have an option to be sponsored, that's pretty straightforward. But then, again, returning to the conversation around people that are living here on protection visas, if they haven't been refused a protection visa yet, then there is possibly time to put in that alternative application because they're not yet Section 48 barred. And so what we say is if someone's contacted us and they're living in Australia, they haven't yet had an outcome on their protection visa, which again can take 6 months to 4 years. We look at whether, where are you working? What are your skills? And then we look at whether there is a real visa pathway available. Because again, under the migration visa application requirements, you sometimes have to hold certain visas in order to put in another visa. Every visa varies. So these are the assessments that I talk about needing to be done before that's a possible option under the skilled work visa scheme rather than the protection visa. So that's the skilled work visa scheme. Basically, you could be sponsored by an employer or the government or independently. Independent migration. With the family scheme, so this is the third stream that we're talking about, that's for partner visas, parent visas, child visas. They're pretty last remaining relative visas. So if you are single and all of your family, say your parents and siblings live in Australia, then a visa like the last remaining relative visa might be an option. That's one that's not commonly known about. So that's another example. I should also say with the skilled work visa options, sometimes I find people might need to study like a formal qualification. And then once they've studied that, then it could possibly make a pathway to skilled visa options. So that's another option as well. Fiji's got very highly recognised skills and qualifications. So that's something that we should be tapping into, like many other nations and migrants are doing, rather than the protection visa. I keep harping on about the protection visa, but we just need to be smarter about.
With good reason.
We just need to be smarter.
And getting the information out there. We're not smart enough. We need to get that information out to as many Fijians and islanders as we can, because we don't know. We
are smarter. It's just the education. That's what I'm realizing. And to tap back on what I was saying, less forgiving before because I thought people were just being not smart about things, but it's just there's too much noise and misinformation, and there's no one counteracting that with the proper options. But otherwise, that's a real like short and sweet version. Several. There's a lot of visa criteria. Don't get me wrong. I need to qualify all of this as, not legal advice. It's the visa options and visa pathways, but there are further visa criteria, obviously, that I'm not going to get into. But that's just a real rundown of of the work visas and other possible visa options that are available in Australia.
Excellent. And it's great to know that there are all these other options that people don't hear about. So this has been such a great conversation. The other one that you touched on a bit, family and so forth, is the partner. You know,
Yes.
the question would be, I have an Australian partner. Can I get a visa? Or do we have to be married, for example?
Yeah. Yeah. So we get this quite often. So there is a partner visa option available. It can be applied for offshore, so outside of Australia, or inside of Australia. So, for example, you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident, and you're sadly doing long distance relationship to someone in Fiji. And I say sadly because there's, you know, Fijians are renowned for writing those songs and melodies on long distance relationships. We were one of them, so I feel it. But Comedy's a product of a partner visa.
I came to
You know, it's a real thing. So what I'm saying is, if you have a partner in Fiji, that's something that should be thought through. So basically, you need a sponsor who's an Australian citizen or a permanent resident of Australia, or there's something called an eligible New Zealand citizen, which basically they're the New Zealand citizens who are living in Australia on or before 26th of February 2001. They can sponsor for a partner visa, which is a permanent residency visa. I wanted to highlight the New Zealand option because I know, you know, within our Islander communities, obviously a lot of us come through New Zealand and maybe living here on a New Zealand passport. And so, yeah, if that's you and you're watching this and you live here on a New Zealand passport since on or before 26th of February 2001, then you're an eligible New Zealand citizen and you can sponsor your partner for a partner visa. As a New Zealander, again, same line of thinking, if you hold a New Zealand passport, but you came after that date, there's another visa called a New Zealand Relationship 461 visa. And so that's for New Zealand citizens in Australia living here that want to bring a family member, such as a partner, to live in Australia. But that visa is a 5-year temporary visa, which just rolls over. You have to renew it every 5 years. Sometimes, so for Fijians, if I want to speak on that, I do find sometimes an Australian Fijian might want their partner from Fiji to visit on a visitor visa, and sometimes that can be quite difficult and they get visitor visa refusals. I sometimes advise or recommend that they just lodge the partner visa from Fiji, and that can take years to process. But in the meantime, it just improves their chances of getting a visitor visa for them to visit in the meantime. Otherwise, a good option is to, if you can get the visitor visa, have that partner come to Australia and then lodge the partner visa from here. And in that meantime, they go on this bridging visa, and on that you can work and have Medicare. But because that process takes 2 years, that's a good option. So at least you're together while the visa is being processed. It's good to get proper sound legal advice around those two options, I think, because overseas processing officers for the Department of Home Affairs are quite strict and sometimes black and white about these things. And I see a lot of applications being refused because they think this person's going to come and overstay or lodge a protection visa, or it's beneficial if they're having difficulties getting visitor visas for their partners, to just get some advice around, you know, strengthening their application and getting some solid advice on the steps to take. Because obviously, you know, we can understand they partners want to be together while they process their visas. The requirements, so Australian sponsor, Australian citizen, permanent resident, or eligible New Zealand citizen. You can be in a de facto relationship or a married relationship. So de facto is defined as living together for 12 months immediately before lodging the application. Obviously, with long distance relationships, you may not be married and you may not have lived together for 12 months. But there is a bit of a loophole with that requirement, depending on which states you live in. If you might be able to register the relationship. So in Queensland, where we are, and again, not all states do this, but in Queensland, you can register a civil partnership. And so that's legally recognised. And that would fulfill the requirements of the partner visa. But again, get some legal advice around that because not every state requires it. Otherwise, the other requirements is to satisfy the Department of Immigration that it's a genuine and continuing relationship, and that requires a lot of evidence. So, how do you prove a relationship on paper? But they'll look at financial aspects, social aspects, nature of the household, the background of the relationship, social aspects as well. But again, a lot of evidence required for that. It is doable. It is an expensive visa. It's about $8,000 now, actually, which is quite shocking. But it's a permanent residency visa, which ultimately can lead to citizenship. So yeah, that's the partner visa. In a nutshell, you don't necessarily need to be married. Depending on which state, you can register relationships. Or you could satisfy the partner visa relationship requirement based on a de facto relationship, which is 12 months living together.
Awesome. Wow. There's a lot of information that you've shared throughout this
Yeah, I hope it's not boring.
There is a lot of.
No, I'm sure that there's so many who will be listening to this that will find this very, very informative as I have, and I'm so glad to be talking with you both, especially being Fijian / Pacific people, Pacific Islanders, understanding from that perspective, being able to really care about helping our people as well, which is a huge part of this whole conversation as well. Now, there's definitely, we'll have to be doing this again because there's so much to talk about, and I know we want to talk about the different types of migration visas, such as permanent residency, PR, and also citizenships, and perhaps dig a little bit more into all the other areas. And we talked about the we also it would be great to talk about the those that are coming in to work on the labor schemes, right? And look at pathways for them, since that is sort of an area that is emerging and is just opening up. We're talking about as far as that is concerned. But we will be seeing Jennifer and Kolinio in Sydney on the 25th of August, and the location that the workshop will be held. So they'll be holding a workshop, and maybe you can just very briefly just talk about that, because they will be covering a lot of what we've spoken about today, and also be able to talk to you a little bit further about the workshop itself and what that'll entail, and of course, the kind of assistance that you'd be able to get from them. Now, they are this workshop that'll be held in Sydney will be an informative session, and it is free to attend. And purely they're doing this to be able to, again, share information out into the community and to be able to help our communities as much as possible. So there'll be an opportunity to then delve into some of these topics a lot more, have some Q&A around this, and actually talk to the lovely couple further on about how they can set. If you just want to keep that date aside, it'll be on the evening of the 25th of August, which is a Thursday night. Probably be at 7 p.m. till about 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. depending on so forth. But we will be informing you of the location that is yet to be confirmed. So maybe you just want to sort of cover a little bit on what you're looking at covering on the workshop, and anything else that you'd like to share before we finish off.
Yes, so we have a few things that we're going to cover. I'll be doing a presentation on general pathways to permanent residency and citizenship in Australia. I'll speak through broadly what visa options are available under the humanitarian scheme, skilled work visa scheme, and family scheme, which can take some time, and I try to keep it simple, but generally following the presentation, I'd hope that people in the crowd would have a general understanding of what visa options are available. We open it up for questions, or I think ahead of time, we might just take some frequently asked questions, or get some questions from people that have registered, and then I would go through my answers to those. But we have our whole team coming on the night. So you'll have Collie, who's now e-Tauke speaker, myself and 2 other solicitors, and then a community liaison officer that works at the firm. So there's opportunity to speak to myself or 2 of our other solicitors. And if that's scary for you, then you can speak to Collie or Ray, who'll be there on the night. Obviously, we can't give in-depth advice on the night or have a full-blown consultation, because these are often private matters that need to be discussed. It's people's lives. But it's just important for us, or we found that it's useful. In the past, we found that it's useful for people to kind of hear about what other options are available and think, oh, that could be me, or oh, that could be an option for my uncle or somebody that they know. And when I first started, I'd talk wherever and wherever 10 years ago. And then I thought, oh, well, this is old news now. People must all know about it. But now we've had 3 children in between, so we kind of had to pull out of it a bit more. But now that they're a bit older, we're back talking, and we're realising that it's probably more need than ever, especially after COVID.
On that point, can I say something? On that point, Sevu, knowing the specific labour scheme coming into action and all our people coming to Australia, and I know for a fact that there are people that are changing, making decisions while they stay in Australia. My employer is not looking after me. I'm going to look for some other work. I'm going to go somewhere else. And just a status that I've been given, there's about 60 Fijians a week coming over on this new scheme. I'm not sure if that figure is correct or not, but I'm looking in the 5 years' time, how many people that are applying for a wrong visa to stay longer, and people are not happy with the specific labour scheme, or I'm being not looked after by my employer, I'm going to go somewhere else. And the advice that we want and the information we want, please stay in your contract, look for proper advice. If you want to change your visa, I mean, there are reasons behind why they want to change, not being looked after properly, not being paid properly. That's the personal decision each Fijian or each Islander or each person that are non-Australian has to make. We can't change that. But the advice that our firm, the information that we want to bring over to Sydney in the next few weeks is, please seek advice, get help. Do not apply for protection visa. That's a last resort you have to go to. Look at other options before making that decision. And that's what I'm scared about, especially as a Fijian, knowing this labour scheme is kicking in, how many Fijians that are coming in from the islands, and how many overstayers in respect applying for a wrong visa, thinking I'm going to stay in Australia for the rest of
or just not going in.
Please seek advice. Just seeking advice is the best way to go forward. That's why we're coming to Sydney, is we've been trying to get the information to our people and to the other non-Australian. Please seek advice, get the right advice before you apply for any visa, let alone protection visa.
Yeah. So on the night, we'll have a chance to meet and chat, and obviously follow-up consultations can happen, but I think that's the main aim of the night, to start getting conversations going on all of the migration options rather than the community focus that's been on one particular visa type. So yeah, that's the need.
Yeah. And on that aspect, Sevu, I'm not sure if whoever's listening, Fijians or any islanders, please don't take advantage of our island people, taking money off people. I'm not sure if this is the right platform, but if there are people out there taking money off and signing people for protection visa, please stop it. Get the advice before you apply for protection visa. And to all our fellow Fijians and islanders out there, don't go with the mess. Don't go out there because it's an easy visa. It's an easy way to get work and Medicare. It's not 100% you stay in Australia. It's a long term, but you can't see the advantage coming out of it. I mean, families and stuff.
Sure.
Please get the proper advice before you apply for protection visa.
Thank you. And, family. Don't listen to people that don't know what they're talking about. And you've heard it discussed on this conversation here this evening, and so many people are being misled, and misinformation has been given to them, and it just brings a lot of hardship. And thank you for your passion about sharing about this, because I'm sure that there are stories that you could share of those who have been totally being disadvantaged because they've followed the wrong advice, and they've trusted in people who really do not have the right information, the qualification to be able to be giving that sort of advice to them. And therefore, as you mentioned earlier about going to a migrational agent, a registered migration agent, those are actually qualified, and to be able to handle your matters and be able to deal with it in a way that's actually going to help you, that your money is not wasted along going down a path that's not going to lead to anything except, a bitter ending at the end, No, so thank you so much for that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish off?
No, I think that's everything. I think, just one more thing. We'll talk about the importance of permanent residency and citizenship. I think another issue we're finding in the community is we're all being sing-a-lenga about citizenship and think permanent residency is permanent, but a large part of my practice is visa cancellation and deportation. And I can tell you right now, permanent residents in our communities
it's not
it's not permanent. It's not permanent. That's the main point. So there's a lot of the community that can get citizenship and are eligible for citizenship, but don't. I have family included. So don't get me wrong, it's a real thing for us, but I do want to educate more around citizenship and basically how easy it is once you're a permanent resident to get that. And it's the best security for you and your family long term and, intergenerationally to secure your future in Australia as well.
Wonderful. And Kolinio, is there any further thing that you just want to add, or?
I'm good, Sevu. Yeah, I've shared my thought. I thought I will.
You said your piece.
That's I said my piece.
Hasn't spoken Fijian yet.
When the right time in Sydney, but that's my passion about getting this information in Sydney, Sevu. Is I've been telling my wife for a few years ago, because people has been, connection family with that same process. And I fear with this new scheme coming in action, we're going to have more in them in the next 5 years. More people are applying for protection visa because they don't know.
Yeah.
So I've been telling Jennifer, my wife, let's go and just tell people, please, to look for other option. It's the generation after you who's going to suffer, not
Yeah.
you. So get the right advice from the get-go,
Amen.
a legal and a proper advice, not from anyone on the street. Go research them, look for them, agent qualified with MARA.
Yeah. We're not saying come to us. We're just saying just go and see someone who knows what they're talking about before.
Before applying for protection visa, I'm scared because with this new scheme, there's a high chance it's going to increase.
Yeah, I agree.
People that apply, yeah.
So true, so true. So this is high
Yeah.
time, good time for this
High
conversation.
time.
Good time.
Perfect timing, yeah.
Yes, so maybe we'll just switch over to Fijian and just end it off in that way as well, right, Jennifer? You brought that up. So, yeah. Vinakasar bakali wikam ni naturan kena maramo ni bakarong tu may nambong yanday. Nagtaka ni yang sarwikim ni na VWC may nakachinggo membalatan na tambanan ni Tiko Day Australia. Nabingon ni sala talangay bakaruta katu na matentu bakaruta katu na matentu menda bakamuria nabe matanggali visa ko ngandre bi meroki na Tiko Day Australia ko kena takachukina na vitalano na workshop ko ena takachukina kurosna bulkali mani okosita na buletungango en ambong ni singa lotuleu. And I think buti ko na bito na kaloko na wati chukong bakaruta na Dios na team na kaloko. Yo ni sa surit saratu yani bakarara mo maningole ni kina and agay solitalan na soni tukutuka na buno na bakadurit kina na songwa na bong ni singa na bong ni lotule na karos na bulkali man kasita. Nita kanina ni reningole ni kina si chukatalang ayo ni leoni matubale. Era na nganreba chiko na bibuke nganreba chiko na ibakasale ro bakaruta chiko ro na beauty ni go bakatalanga kino to no boni no to timi etolu chiko na no to lawyer va kena botalanga no to timi to ngalsar chiko me Queensland se Queensland di merto me wasene tukutuong go me buke kianda na kawito ke ir talanga na boni non da me na was Pasifika nganreba to na bibuke ena kena sangaiti go me matata me solina na ituku me ada na be bakarara mate kena tambanongo me raukini ni veirno no darangan rebe ko me retiko de Australia me raukini no repepa pongana be se queda ko tingona bungendai tiko talango turang matanggali and they will cut to me dona kanga be wase ani bakala ka bakaviti be kemni na bakarong to me na boni singandai na
Esa no vale bo matagali na bunin ni to na ngoli chuka ni Sydney na pidan na sinanga madomengo me ke tole bi barara matanga ni na bi matangali visa na option na bi matangali visa tiko sembera ni ra apply ta kana nakakitoro tiko na nito firm i Brisbane na lima na baki nito na danlawa na solista kito letolo ito danlawa kito bida chiko na leo ni staff tali ni nito timi nakakitoro ito man na lima na baki sawoti na lebu ni ngangandre ni bangara path ni visa tapon donto no mer apply taka lebu na ni dalak ngamen to sama bimur-muri tak nga na lakon dalak nga apply taka na protection visa na nabuna lewu saranga veya bakawiti au kau tekina nito timisi ningo na madho vito mengo bekito lebi bararam teknga itiko tali sonangan sala mumuria mo valewa na form me rauni ko tikundekina sa sengang ni protection visa naka kito kilama na limna bagsautiendre ni soli bekenda na kito na kawiti na visa go kung ano na kena balam sa ni matagali na me sole na visa option dapat na more ni apply taka kung man ni si apply taka ni protection visa bangara talento na option bosot sa kaya matagali kung nga na au na kayo emosi kinabiyaw bete new kila na scheme sana lako maingo na PLS lele undana lako may bitin undana lako man na may rate na puro lebo
valeu iya
dana stress dana na itugutugo na balewen oi kumeti tunde apply ta kana protection visa yan ay tala no wrong ate tiko na kina na lako tiko na itugutugo ningo e mosi be ang berarti nikla may na nero ka ba beauty na tambanan ni tambanan ko karo kila na sera ni solve ko e soli nga beira e don mi solve na protection visa kakuni apply taka kakuni balewena e leu tali tu na be option mo balewena ko esa na bonito la kung ko iserne na pita na mga domingo me keto le tuku na kako we kendo to teman na kito na leoni kay bitie kerkere Juan Carrota sa nangon salo kyo ani nito na sa rongo de tigo mana lima na ba kyo tugun tigbe ko me keto ngol me keto bibara ramataki sa kena ngono be ka ngono dun ko me keto ngol ni Sydney o tia keto nangon sa Melbourne keto le vida na singe Sydney ke le me keto le bibara ramataki nga matagali mera kila na kenda nangol le bata mai biti kaponi apply taka na visa ngo ele utali tu na via matangkali visa mo apply taka mulai na visa koendre di solve ko na matinto Australia na baendre taka na ken solve ko e ona tigo ke tina baki ona daka ona Medicare na solve ko na Medicare na wotima na patulo amena soli kito rede tigo ngo mana baki ngo dua nga mana lero sa muka bitter apply approve taka na boy reject na figa esa nga ni figa nga nito na baki na figa na tigo me ata usar kila iyo na appeal Kaya kedo awe wirum na kanawe kangu na nungu fena message mai email mai kerkere wangar bakasala mai bir na kenanda kun ko ngani lak mai kito lebu tu na migration lawyer migration agent around Australia look for advice before you apply for protection visa ko ngaya matagali kaya baka betaray na tukutung ni bitala nongo au kangaya binakatamu tukun bir na kanda mai biti Wanggar bakal salah sembera new apply takana nomor protection visa.
Na sarap bakal Oni sarap juga na turangkan maram na nonro VSA o Jennifer mataki nonalen matubale o turang matanggali Kolinio sa may VSA tukin ni tukongo o sinisa suriti talchenga mendangoleani kemnina bagay tukutuku serne nagay sultalanga ni tukutuku balatan bunana do kinasong may malabani nirto nangol sobenkina ve kemnina bagarong chukumay ni reni ve tartar talanga may sona ngoni sala na bagaruti kichum ni ve tartar may kina ratalanga ni na nagay sul ni tukutuku may balatan bunana bagador chikinasongo ena bongni singa lotu lebne karosa bulkalima ni wula chingango kusita na tengu chuna vitu na kaloko sana ge wasi tal chuka ni tukutuku bina vanua na baka doriki na songo ya ro to sana tiki no to na mate timingo may na Samuta and
McComber Lawyers.
Is that right?
Samuta McComber Lawyers.
Samuta McComber Lawyers erto na wala sa chuma in Brisbane au binakata mo baka binakasar vero na biutine no nonro sulit ko nonro ngona sulit al chunga na lonra mero buke kina baka itu chungo turang matangali na be baka rara mataki ver na nonda na kena mo siti ro chugo ni ro daga chugo na tambanongo rede tu na lebu ni lenga erme adu chugo vir na nonda Para sangat tu ni ramuria na ngoni salan dono sing sul talanga bir na baka salan dono mermuria merau kini gaisol na non rapepa ko na sangai tu ngoni kina na be baka raram tegang ko na be say mena toso chico teni ngone kito baka dor chicken ngo so talana be talano na ga tal chinga me wasi tu ngoni kini tuku esongo. So thank you very much to you both for this evening and for sharing the information that you have. And as we've already mentioned, that we'll be having the workshop in Sydney and information session on the 25th of August, Thursday evening at 7 p.m. The location is to be confirmed. We will have that to you soon, but we wanted to just get this out and start having this conversation and get people ready with a lot of their questions to put the time aside to come. And of course, you can then talk directly with the team from Samuta and McComber and find out more on how they can help you, how they can assist you, how they can help your families in terms of ensuring that you get the right advice and help that you need. So that's from us.
Naka. Mother.